When Mira Elson crawled into the wrong black car and fell asleep, she had no idea she'd just made the most dangerous mistake of her life, or that it would change everything. What happens when a timid psychology student wakes up in the world of a ruthless crime boss? When fear meets protection and innocence collides with darkness? This is a story of transformation, danger, and an impossible connection that neither of them saw coming. Stay until the end to see how this unfolds, hit that like button, and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The rain came down in sheets, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of reflected neon. Mira Elson stood under the awning of the university library, her psychology textbooks clutched against her chest like armor, watching the downpour with tired eyes that had stopped focusing hours ago. 3 exams in 2 days, a double shift at the campus bookstore, 4 hours of sleep total. Her mind felt like static, white noise where coherent thoughts used to be. The black sedan pulled up to the curb with barely a whisper, its headlights cutting through the rain. Mira's phone buzzed, her rideshare app. Finally. She'd been waiting 20 minutes, watching 2 other drivers cancel on her. She didn't look at the license plate, didn't check the make or model, didn't do any of the safety checks her roommate always nagged her about. She just wanted to go home. The back door was already unlocked. Mira slid in, immediately enveloped by leather seats that smelled expensive, nothing like the usual ride shares with their air fresheners and questionable stains. The warmth hit her like a wave, and she sank into the seat with a small sigh of relief. "Apartment on 5th and—" she started, but her voice came out barely above a whisper. She cleared her throat, tried again. "Sorry, 5th and Marketplace, the building with the blue awning." No response from the driver. But that wasn't unusual. Half the rideshare drivers in the city drove in silence, and honestly, Mira preferred it that way. Less chance of awkward small talk she'd stumble through, saying the wrong thing, making it weird. She leaned her head against the window, feeling the cold glass against her temple. The car started moving, smooth and steady. The motion was almost hypnotic, the rain a constant rhythm against the windows. "Just rest your eyes for a minute," she told herself. "Just until the spinning in your head stops." The last thing she registered was the car turning left instead of right, but she was already too far gone to care, too exhausted to process it, too drained to fight the pull of sleep dragging her down into darkness. Dante Moretti was having the kind of night that required 3 fingers of bourbon and complete silence. The meeting with the Vitale family had gone exactly as poorly as he'd anticipated. They wanted territory he'd already claimed. They wanted concessions he'd never give. They wanted to test him, see if the rumors were true, if he was really as ruthless as they said. He'd proven that he was. The look on Vitale's face when Dante had calmly explained exactly what would happen to anyone who crossed into his holdings had been almost satisfying. Almost. Because the truth was, Dante was tired. Tired of the posturing, the endless chess games, the violence that clung to him like a second skin. Marco, his driver and head of security, had the good sense to stay quiet as they left the restaurant. The partition between the front and back seats was up, giving Dante the solitude he needed. The city passed by in blurs of light and shadow, rain obscuring everything, making the world outside feel distant and unreal. They were 3 blocks from his penthouse when Marco's voice came through the intercom, unusually hesitant. "Boss, we have a situation." Dante's eyes opened, his hand instinctively moving toward the gun in his shoulder holster. "What kind of situation?" "There's someone in the back seat." For a moment, Dante thought he'd misheard. He turned, looking at the space beside him that he'd assumed was empty, that should have been empty. There was a girl. Not a woman. A girl. Maybe early 20s, curled up against the opposite door like a child. Her dark hair fell across her face in damp waves. An oversized cardigan, university sweatshirt, jeans with frayed hems. A backpack at her feet, stuffed with books. She was dead asleep, her breathing soft and even, completely unaware that she'd just climbed into the car of one of the most dangerous men in Chicago. "How the hell—" Dante started, but Marco cut him off. "I didn't see her get in, boss, I swear. We were parked at that light on Michigan Avenue, and I was checking the mirrors, and she must have just opened the door, and you didn't lock the doors?" Dante's voice was cold, controlled.
The kind of cold that made grown men nervous.
I did. I always do. But the lock on that side's been sticking since last week. I told you we needed to get it fixed. Dante remembered. He'd dismissed it as unimportant. Right now, staring at this sleeping stranger in his car, it felt profoundly important. She thinks this is a rideshare, Marco continued, his voice tight with worry. Must have gotten in the wrong car. What do you want me to do? It was a simple question with obvious answers. Wake her up, drop her off, get her out of his car and out of his life before this became a problem. But Dante found himself watching her instead, taking in details he shouldn't care about. The shadows under her eyes, dark as bruises. The way her hands were tucked under her cheek, small and delicate. The slight tremor in her breathing that suggested she was cold, even in sleep. She looked fragile, breakable, like something that had no business existing in his world. Boss? Marco prompted, waiting for orders.
Drive, Dante heard himself say.
Take us home.
Home? But what about just drive, Marco? There was a pause, heavy with Marco's confusion and concern. But he'd been with Dante long enough to know when not to push. The partition went up and the car continued through the rain-soaked streets. Dante should wake her up. Every rational part of his brain knew that. This was a security risk, a complication, a stranger in his space, in his life. And he'd built his empire on never allowing such variables. Instead, he found himself reaching over slowly, carefully, and adjusting the climate control so warm air flowed toward her side of the car. She shifted slightly in her sleep, a small sound escaping her throat. Not quite a word, just an exhale of what might have been relief. Something twisted in Dante's chest, unfamiliar and unwelcome. He turned away, looking out his own window at the city he'd conquered through violence and calculated ruthlessness. Somewhere out there, people feared his name. Somewhere out there, his enemies were plotting his downfall. Somewhere out there, the world he'd built waited for him to slip, to show weakness, to make a mistake. And here he was, letting a girl who'd stumbled into the wrong car sleep peacefully beside him when he should be treating her as a threat. The bourbon in his system wasn't enough to explain this. Neither was fatigue from too many late nights managing his empire. This was something else, something he couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. When they reached his building, a luxury high-rise in the Gold Coast that he owned entirely, every floor, Marco pulled into the private underground garage. He cut the engine and waited, clearly unsure what came next. Dante looked at the girl again. She hadn't stirred once during the 20-minute drive. Whatever had exhausted her this thoroughly, it ran deep. "Get her things," Dante said quietly, opening his door. "And tell no one about this." "Boss, are you sure Marco." Just his name, said in that particular tone. It was enough. Dante came around to her side of the car and opened the door carefully. She didn't wake. He reached in, hesitating for just a moment before sliding one arm under her knees and the other behind her back. She was lighter than he expected, almost weightless as he lifted her from the car. She made a small sound of protest, her face turning toward his chest. But she didn't wake. Just settled against him like she belonged there, like this was somehow natural. Dante carried her toward the private elevator, Marco following with her backpack, both of them silent. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt longer than usual. Dante acutely aware of every floor they passed, every second this girl remained unconscious in his arms. His penthouse was exactly as he'd left it that morning, stark, modern, more functional than comfortable. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, black leather furniture, chrome fixtures, abstract art on the walls that he'd bought, because his decorator said it sent the right message. It looked like what it was, a place where someone lived but didn't have a life. He took her to one of the guest rooms, a space he'd never actually used for guests, set her down on the bed carefully, as if she might shatter, removed her shoes, beat up sneakers that had seen better days, pulled a blanket over her. She curled onto her side immediately, one hand tucked under her cheek again, breathing deep and even. In sleep, her face was peaceful, young, innocent in a way that made Dante acutely aware of everything he'd done, everything he'd become. He should leave, should let her sleep and deal with this in the morning. Instead, he found himself sitting in the chair by the window, watching the rain stream down the glass, occasionally glancing back at this stranger who'd accidentally wandered into his life. Who was she?
What had exhausted her so completely that she'd fallen asleep in a stranger's car without a second thought? What kind of life did she have that made her so trusting, so unaware of danger? And why did the sight of her, small and vulnerable in that bed, make him want to ensure nothing ever touched her? These weren't the thoughts of a man who'd built an empire on fear. These weren't the instincts of someone who'd done the things Dante had done. But as he sat there in the darkness, listening to the rain and the soft sound of her breathing, Dante Moretti, crime boss, killer, man without mercy, felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt protective. Mira woke slowly, consciousness returning in fragments. Warm. She was so warm. And the bed beneath her felt like clouds, soft in a way her lumpy dorm mattress had never been. The pillow smelled clean, expensive, like laundry detergent that probably cost more than her groceries. For a few blissful seconds, she just enjoyed it. Then her brain started processing other details. This wasn't her room. The ceiling above her was too high. The light filtering through wherever she was came from the wrong direction. And she was still wearing yesterday's clothes, minus her shoes. Panic hit like ice water. Mira sat up fast, too fast, the room spinning slightly as her eyes adjusted. She was in a bedroom, a guest room maybe. Everything was shades of gray and white, minimal and pristine. Through a doorway, she could see part of what looked like a hallway, and through a massive window, a view of Chicago that suggested she was very, very high up. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Where was she? How did she get here? The last thing she remembered was getting into the rideshare, telling the driver her address, closing her eyes for just a moment. Oh no, oh no, no, no. This wasn't her rideshare. This was someone else's car. She'd gotten into the wrong car and fallen asleep, and now she was in a stranger's home and she had no idea what happened, or how long she'd been here, or... The door opened. Mira's breath caught. The man who stepped through the doorway was not what she'd expected, though she wasn't sure what she'd expected. He was tall, probably early 30s, wearing a black suit that looked like it cost more than her entire education. Dark hair, sharp features, eyes that were almost black in the morning light. And he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't read. Not angry, exactly, not threatening, just intense. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle, and she was the missing piece. "You're awake," he said. His voice was deep, measured, with an edge that suggested he was used to being listened to. Mira opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her throat had closed up entirely, fear and confusion strangling whatever words she might have found. He raised one hand slightly, a gesture that was probably meant to be calming. "Don't be afraid. You're safe." That's what people said right before terrible things happened in movies. Mira's hands clutched the blanket, her mind racing through options. The window was too high to jump from. The door was behind him. Her phone. Where was her phone? "Your things are on the dresser," he continued, as if reading her mind. He gestured to a dark wood dresser where her backpack sat. "Including your phone, it's been charging." Mira's eyes darted to the backpack, then back to him. Her voice, when it finally came, was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" "My name is Dante Moretti." He said it like she should recognize it. When her expression remained blank, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or relief. "You got into my car last night, outside the university. You were supposed to take a rideshare, but you got into mine instead." The pieces started coming together, forming a picture that made Mira's stomach drop. "I'm so sorry. I was so tired, I didn't even check. I just saw a black car and I thought..." The words tumbled out in a rush, her voice shaking. "I'm sorry. I'll leave right now. I didn't mean to. I know this is weird and I'm so sorry." "Stop apologizing," Dante said, but his tone wasn't harsh, just firm. "You fell asleep. I brought you here rather than wake you." Mira stared at him, trying to process this. "You brought me to your home? Instead of just waking me up and putting me in a real rideshare?" "Yes." "Why?" The question hung between them. Dante's jaw tightened slightly, like he was asking himself the same thing. "You were exhausted. It seemed unnecessary to disturb you." That made no sense. None of this made sense. People didn't just bring strangers home because they were tired. Especially not men who looked like him, who lived in places like this, who had an intensity in their eyes that suggested they were dangerous in ways Mira couldn't even imagine.
I need to go, she said, pushing the blanket off and standing on shaky legs. Thank you for not being a terrible person who did terrible things while I was asleep, but I really need to leave now. You need to eat something first. Mira froze halfway to the dresser. What? Breakfast, Dante said calmly. You've been asleep for almost 12 hours. When's the last time you ate? She tried to remember. Yesterday sometime? The day before? Everything blurred together in a haze of exams and work shifts and cafeteria coffee. That's not your problem. I'll just grab my stuff and I'm not holding you hostage. Dante's voice cut through her rambling. You can leave whenever you want, but you're pale, you're shaking, and I doubt you have the energy to make it to the elevator, let alone home. He wasn't wrong. Mira could feel the tremor in her hands, the weakness in her legs. Adrenaline had carried her through the initial panic, but now it was fading, leaving behind the same exhaustion that had made her stupid enough to get into the wrong car in the first place. Why are you being nice to me? The question came out before she could stop it, raw and confused. Dante studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. I'm not a nice man, Mira, but I'm not going to let you pass out on my floor when there's food in the kitchen. He knew her name. She hadn't told him her name. You looked through my things, she said, trying to inject some indignation into her voice and failing. Your student ID was visible in your backpack. Marco needed to know who you were. Marco? My driver, who is going to drive you home after you eat. Dante turned toward the door, then paused. There are fresh towels in the bathroom if you want to shower first. Take your time. He left before Mira could formulate a response, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click. Mira stood there for a long moment, alone in the strange room, trying to make sense of what was happening. Everything in her screamed that this was wrong, that she should grab her stuff and run. But another part of her, the part that studied psychology, that tried to understand people, couldn't reconcile the fear she should be feeling with what she was actually experiencing. This man, this Dante Moretti, had done nothing threatening, had in fact been almost considerate? Her stomach growled, making the decision for her. Fine. She'd eat something, get her strength back. Then she'd leave and never think about this bizarre night again. The bathroom was just as pristine as the bedroom, all marble and chrome and fluffy white towels. Mira caught her reflection in the mirror and winced. Her hair was a disaster, her makeup smudged, her clothes rumpled from sleeping in them. She looked exactly like someone who'd passed out in a stranger's car. A shower sounded like heaven, but that felt too familiar, too comfortable. She settled for washing her face and attempting to tame her hair into something resembling order. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, backpack slung over her shoulder like armor, she found the hallway empty. The penthouse was even more impressive in daylight, huge and modern and expensive in a way that made Mira acutely aware of her secondhand everything. She followed the smell of coffee and found the kitchen. Dante stood at the counter pouring 2 mugs. He'd removed his suit jacket, and in just the white shirt and dark slacks, he looked slightly less intimidating. Slightly. Coffee? He offered, and Mira found herself nodding before her brain caught up. She accepted the mug with hands that still shook slightly, wrapping her fingers around the ceramic for something to hold on to. The first sip was perfect, exactly the right temperature, exactly the right strength. Better than anything she'd made in the broken coffee maker she shared with her roommate. There's food, Dante said, gesturing to the counter where plates sat waiting. Bagels, fruit, containers of cream cheese and jam. Simple, but more than she usually managed. Mira sat at the kitchen island, Dante taking the seat across from her. The silence should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. She ate slowly, and he just drank his coffee, not pushing conversation, not demanding anything. This is weird, Mira said finally, the words escaping before she could stop them. The corner of Dante's mouth twitched, almost a smile. Yes, normal people would have just woken me up. I'm not normal people. I'm getting that impression. Mira took another bite of bagel, gathering courage. What do you do? For work, I mean. You must do something to afford. She gestured vaguely at the penthouse around them. Dante's expression shifted, something shuddering behind his eyes. Import and export. Various business holdings. It was clearly a rehearsed answer, deliberately vague. Mira might have been naive about rideshares, but she wasn't stupid.
Men who did legitimate import-export business didn't have this kind of presence, this edge of danger that clung to Dante like cologne. But she didn't push, mostly because she was afraid of what the real answer might be. "And you?" Dante asked. "Psychology student?" "How did you—" She cut herself off. "Right, student ID. Why psychology?" The question surprised her. Most people asked that to be polite, not because they actually cared about the answer, but the way Dante looked at her suggested genuine interest. "I want to understand people," Mira said quietly. "Why they do what they do. What makes someone choose violence over peace, anger over compassion, how trauma shapes us, how we can heal from it. And do you understand people?" "Sometimes. Maybe. I don't know." She met his eyes, something emboldening her to honesty. "I understand that everyone has reasons for what they do. That nobody wakes up and decides to be a bad person. That circumstances and choices and pain all tangle together until we can't always tell where one ends and another begins." Dante was quiet for a long moment, his coffee forgotten in his hands. "That's a generous way of looking at the world." "Is it? Most people see things in black and white, good and bad, right and wrong. Most people haven't studied enough to know better." Mira set down her mug, feeling bolder. "Or maybe most people are afraid of the gray areas. Because if bad people aren't completely bad, if good people aren't completely good, then we all have to face what we're capable of." Something flickered across Dante's face. Recognition, maybe, or pain. "You're very young to be that cynical." "I'm not cynical. I'm realistic." She paused. "And you're not that much older than me." "I'm older in ways that matter." The weight behind those words was impossible to miss. Mira wanted to ask what he meant, wanted to understand this man who'd shown her unexpected kindness for reasons he couldn't seem to explain. But before she could formulate the question, her phone buzzed. She pulled it from her pocket, wincing at the 17 missed calls and 32 text messages, most from her roommate Jess. "Where are you?" "Mira, answer your phone. I'm calling the police." "Mira, are you dead? If you're not dead, I'm going to kill you. I need to—" Mira gestured with the phone. "My roommate thinks I'm dead." "Call her," Dante said simply. "Let her know you're alive." Mira stepped into the living room, dialing Jess's number. Her roommate answered on the first ring. "Mira Elson, where the hell have you been?" "I'm okay, Jess. I'm fine. I'm so sorry." "You didn't come home last night. Your rideshare said the trip was canceled. I thought you were kidnapped or murdered or—" "I fell asleep in the wrong car," Mira said, the words sounding ridiculous out loud. "I got into someone's car by mistake and just passed out. But it was fine. He was nice. He's letting me leave now." There was a long pause on the other end. "He? Mira, please tell me you didn't spend the night with some random guy's place." "It's not like that. Nothing happened. I just slept and now I'm eating breakfast and then I'm coming home." "Eating breakfast?" Jess's voice had gone flat with disbelief. "With a stranger whose car you accidentally got into. It sounds worse than it is. It sounds like the beginning of a true crime podcast. Mira, what the hell were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking. I was exhausted and stupid and I made a mistake, but I'm okay. I promise." Another pause. "Where are you?" "I'm coming to get you." No, you don't need to. Address now." Mira sighed, recognizing the tone. Jess, in protective mode, was an unstoppable force. She glanced toward the kitchen where Dante stood, now on his own phone, his voice too low to make out words, but his posture radiating authority. "I don't actually know the address," Mira admitted. "But I'll text you when I'm on my way home. 30 minutes, okay? Just don't call the police or anything dramatic." 30 minutes, Mira. Then I'm tracking your phone and coming to find you myself." The line went dead. Mira returned to the kitchen just as Dante ended his own call. "Everything all right?" he asked. "My roommate thinks I'm going to end up on a podcast about missing girls." Mira tried to smile, but it came out shaky. "I should really go before she actually calls the police." Dante nodded, but something in his expression had changed, closed off. "Marco's bringing the car around. I'll have him take you wherever you need to go." "You really don't have to." "I'm not letting you take public transportation."
There was no room for argument in his tone. They stood there for a moment, the kitchen suddenly feeling too small despite its size. Mira searched for something to say, some way to acknowledge the strangeness of the last 12 hours. "Thank you," she finally settled on, "for not being a terrible person." That almost smile again. "The bar is very low, apparently." "In my experience, most people don't clear it." Dante walked her to the elevator, her backpack feeling impossibly heavy on her shoulders. As they waited for the doors to open, Mira found herself wanting to say something else, something more. But what was there to say? Thanks for the kidnapping that wasn't actually a kidnapping? Sorry for invading your space because I was too stupid to check the license plate? The elevator arrived with a soft chime. "Mira." Dante's voice stopped her just before she stepped inside. She turned, finding him closer than she'd expected, dark eyes searching her face for something. "If you ever need anything, if you're ever in trouble, call me." He held out a business card, simple, expensive cardstock with just a name and phone number. No company, no title, just Dante Moretti and 10 digits. "I don't understand," Mira said, taking the card with trembling fingers. "Why would you—" "Just take it, please." The please was what made her slip the card into her pocket. That and the way he looked at her, like she was something precious he was trying not to break. "Okay," she whispered. The elevator doors closed between them, and Mira watched Dante's face disappear as she descended. When she reached the garage, Marco was waiting by an identical black sedan, though this one, Mira noticed, definitely did not have a rideshare sticker. The drive back to her apartment was silent except for the GPS directions she gave. Marco was professional, polite, and entirely unreadable. When he pulled up outside her building, he simply nodded as she got out. "Thank you," Mira said, "for not, last night." "Mr. Moretti gave strict orders," Marco replied, and something in his tone suggested those orders had been very specific and very serious. You were to be kept safe. Safe. The word echoed in Mira's mind as she trudged up the 3 flights to her apartment, as Jess ambushed her at the door with a hug that turned into a lecture about stranger danger, as she finally collapsed onto her own lumpy mattress with Dante Moretti's business card still in her pocket. She should throw it away. Should forget this whole bizarre night ever happened. Should return to her normal life of exams and work shifts and careful avoidance of anything that might be dangerous or complicated. Instead, she found herself holding the card, running her thumb over the embossed lettering, remembering dark eyes and an almost smile, and the strange, unexpected feeling of being seen by someone who had no reason to look at her at all. Mira Elson had spent her whole life trying to be invisible, and somehow in the space of one exhausted mistake, she'd caught the attention of a man who made her feel anything but. She had no idea that this was just the beginning. That Dante Moretti would become the most important, most dangerous, most transformative person in her life. That the wrong car had actually been exactly the right one all along. 3 days passed before Mira touched the business card again. She'd hidden it in her desk drawer, beneath old syllabi and highlighters that had run dry. Out of sight, supposedly out of mind. Except her mind kept circling back to it. To him. In moments she couldn't control. During her abnormal psychology lecture when Professor Chen discussed compartmentalization and trauma response. While restocking textbooks at work, her hands moving on autopilot. Late at night, when Jess had finally stopped interrogating her and the apartment fell quiet. "You're being weird," Jess announced on Thursday evening, sprawled across Mira's bed while Mira pretended to study. "Weirder than usual, I mean." "I'm not being weird. You've read the same page 4 times. I counted." Mira closed her textbook with more force than necessary. "I'm tired." "You're always tired. This is different." Jess sat up, her dark eyes narrowing with the focus she usually reserved for her investigative journalism assignments. "This is about him, isn't it? Mystery car guy. His name is Dante." "Oh, so we're on a first-name basis with our potential kidnappers now?" "He wasn't." Mira stopped herself, recognizing the trap. Jess had been trying to get more information out of her for days. "Can we not do this again? We can stop when you admit that this whole thing is insane and you're never seeing him again." "I'm not seeing him. I saw him once, by accident." "Good." Jess flopped back down. "Keep it that way. Rich guys with mysterious jobs and private penthouses, that's how people end up on Dateline specials." Mira wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because Jess was right. The whole situation was insane. She should forget about Dante Moretti and his dark eyes, and the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. She lasted 2 more days. Saturday afternoon found Mira at the campus library again, this time voluntarily. She'd claimed a corner table on the 3rd floor, surrounded by psychology journals she was pretending to read for her research paper. In reality, she'd spent the last hour staring at Dante's business card, turning it over and over between her fingers. If you ever need anything, if you're ever in trouble. She didn't need anything, wasn't in trouble, had absolutely no reason to call. Except she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd made her feel safe in a situation that should have terrified her. The way he'd listened when she talked about psychology, really listened, like her thoughts mattered. The way he'd given her his number with that single word, please, that suggested he wanted her to use it. Before she could talk herself out of it, Mira pulled out her phone and typed a message. Hi, this is Mira. From the car. I just wanted to say thank you again for being decent about everything. She stared at it for a full minute before deleting it. Too formal, too awkward. She tried again. Hey, it's Mira. Hope this isn't weird, but I wanted to thank you properly for last weekend. Delete. That sounded like she wanted to thank him in person, which was not what she meant. Probably. This is Mira Elson, the girl who fell asleep in your car. Just wanted to say hi and thank you. Her finger hovered over the send button. This was stupid. He'd probably forgotten about her already. Or worse, he was just being polite when he gave her his number and didn't actually expect her to use it. She was probably... Her phone buzzed. An incoming call. Unknown number. Mira answered without thinking. Hello? You were going to send that message, delete it, and spend the next 3 hours convincing yourself I don't want to hear from you. Dante's voice hit her like a shot of espresso, warm and dark and impossible to ignore. Mira's breath caught. How did you... I have your number from your student ID. I've been waiting to see if you'd use mine. That's... Mira searched for the right word. Creepy? Probably. There was something in his voice that might have been amusement. Are you going to hang up? She should. Every instinct she'd developed from years of avoiding confrontation told her to end this call, delete his number, forget he existed. No, she heard herself say instead. Good. A pause. What were you going to say? In the message. I was just going to thank you, again, for not being terrible. Still a low bar. You'd be surprised how many people don't clear it. Mira shifted in her chair, aware that she was smiling for no good reason. How did you know I was trying to text you? I didn't. I was hoping you would, and when I saw your number appear, I took a chance. You monitor your phone that closely? When I'm waiting for something important, yes. The words settled in Mira's chest, warm and unsettling. I'm not important. You don't even know me. I know you fell asleep in a stranger's car because you trust too easily. I know you study psychology because you want to understand why people hurt each other. I know you apologize too much and second-guess yourself even more. His voice softened. I know I haven't stopped thinking about you since you left. Mira's hand tightened on the phone. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because... She struggled to articulate it. Because we're strangers. Because this whole thing is weird. Because you're you, and I'm me, and none of this makes sense. Not everything has to make sense, Mira. That's not how the world works. Your world maybe. Mine operates on different rules. There was something ominous in that statement, something that should have made her nervous. Instead, Mira found herself curious. What kind of rules? Dante was quiet for a moment. The kind where I do what I want, and people don't question it. Where I see something I'm drawn to, and I pursue it. Where I don't apologize for wanting things. And you want... Mira couldn't finish the sentence. To see you again, if you'll let me. Her psychology textbook sat forgotten in front of her. Everything she'd learned about healthy boundaries and red flags and the importance of rational decision-making warred with the strange pull she felt toward this man who made no sense in her careful, controlled life. I don't think that's a good idea, she said, but her voice wavered. Why not? Because you're... She gestured helplessly, even though he couldn't see her.
And I'm just a student who falls asleep in cars and can barely afford coffee and doesn't understand what you could possibly want with me. Have dinner with me tonight. What? Dinner. Tonight. Let me take you somewhere. I can't just... Why not? Because I have studying to do and my roommate will kill me and I don't even know what I'd wear and... Mira. Just her name, said in that steady voice that somehow cut through her spiral of anxiety.
Do you want to see me again? The honest answer terrified her. Yes. Then everything else is just details. I'll send a car at 7. Wear whatever you're comfortable in, and tell your roommate you'll be home by midnight. You can't just... 7 o'clock, Mira. Say yes. She should say no. Should recognize this for the red flag it obviously was. Should listen to every self-preservation instinct she'd developed. Yes, she whispered instead. Good.
She could hear the satisfaction in his voice. I'll see you tonight. He hung up before she could change her mind, leaving Mira staring at her phone in the silent library, wondering what she'd just agreed to. The next few hours passed in a blur of panic and preparation. Jess alternated between excited squealing and stern warnings about serial killers. Mira tried on 7 different outfits before settling on a simple dark blue dress she'd bought for her cousin's wedding 2 years ago, the nicest thing she owned that wasn't jeans or university hoodies. You look beautiful, Jess said, softening her earlier concerns. Terrified, but beautiful. I feel like I'm going to throw up. That's probably a healthy response to whatever this is. Jess handed her a small canister. Pepper spray. Keep it in your purse. Text me every hour. If I don't hear from you by midnight, I'm calling every police department in the state. That's dramatic. Says the girl having dinner with a stranger who literally abducted her last week. He didn't abduct me. I got in his car by mistake. Potato. Just be careful, okay? Jess pulled her into a hug. And if he's weird or creepy or makes you uncomfortable at all, leave. Don't worry about being polite. Just leave. Mira nodded against her shoulder, grateful for a friend who worried even when she was being irrational. At precisely 7 o'clock, her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Downstairs. No rush. Mira grabbed her purse, the pepper spray safely tucked inside, and headed down. The same black sedan from before waited at the curb, Marco behind the wheel. He nodded at her in the rearview mirror as she slid into the back seat. Good evening, Miss Elson. Hi, Marco. You can just call me Mira. Mr. Moretti prefers formality, but his tone was kind, almost amused. They drove through the city as evening settled in, the sky turning shades of orange and purple. Mira watched the familiar streets give way to neighborhoods she'd only seen from a distance, the kind where buildings had doormen and restaurants had dress codes. Where are we going? She asked. Mr. Moretti thought you might be uncomfortable in a public restaurant. He's arranged something more private. That should have set off alarm bells. Instead, Mira felt a flutter of something that might have been anticipation. They pulled up to a building that looked like it belonged in a movie, all Art Deco architecture and polished brass. Marco opened her door, gesturing toward the entrance where Dante stood waiting. He'd traded the suit for dark slacks and a black button-down, the sleeves rolled to his forearms. Somehow he looked even more dangerous like this, less polished and more real. Mira. He said her name like a greeting and a question all at once. Hi. It came out barely above a whisper. You look beautiful. Heat flooded her cheeks. You don't have to say that. I don't say things I don't mean. He offered his hand. Come on. Mira placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers, the controlled strength in his fingers as they closed gently around hers. He led her into the building, past a security desk where the guard nodded respectfully, into an elevator with brass doors. This is your building, Mira realized as the elevator climbed. Yes. We're going to your apartment. The restaurant on the roof, actually. I own the building. The restaurant operates privately. Of course he did. Of course he owned an entire building with a private restaurant. Mira tried to reconcile this reality with her own life of student loans and shift work. The elevator opened directly into a space that took her breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city, the lights just beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. A single table sat in the center of the room, set for 2 with candles and flowers and what looked like actual crystal. This is too much, Mira said, her voice small. This is dinner. Dante led her to the table, pulling out her chair. Nothing more, nothing less. But it was more. Everything about this was more beautiful, more thoughtful, more overwhelming than anything Mira had experienced. A waiter appeared as if summoned, pouring wine and describing dishes Mira couldn't pronounce. She nodded along, feeling completely out of her depth. When they were alone again, Dante watching her over the rim of his wine glass, Mira finally found her voice. Why are you doing this? Having dinner? All of this. The private restaurant, the candles, She gestured at the view. Everything. You could have anyone. Why me? Dante set down his glass, his expression serious. Do you want the truth? Always? I don't know. He leaned back in his chair. You stumbled into my car by accident, and something about you made me want to keep you safe. Made me want to know more. Made me feel something I haven't felt in a very long time. What? Curious? Protective? Alive? He met her eyes. You look at the world like it's basically good, like people are worth understanding. And I look at you and wonder what that's like. Mira's throat tightened. You make me sound naive. You're not naive. You're hopeful. There's a difference. What's your world like? The question escaped before she could stop it. When you look at it, what do you see? Dante was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was deciding how much to share. I see power structures and leverage points. I see weaknesses to exploit and threats to eliminate. I see a game where the rules are written by whoever's strong enough to enforce them. That sounds exhausting. It's survival. No. Mira shook her head. Survival is eating and sleeping and not dying. What you're describing is something else. And what would you call it? Control, maybe, or fear. You're trying to control everything so you don't have to be afraid. Dante's eyes darkened, but not with anger, with recognition. Psychology student. Sorry, I can't turn it off sometimes. Don't apologize. You're right. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. But you should know that the things I do to maintain that control aren't things you want to understand. It was a warning, clear and direct. Mira should have pulled her hand back, should have recognized this as her exit. Instead, she turned her palm up, letting their fingers intertwine. What if I want to try? You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. Help me understand. I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The food arrived then, breaking the moment. They ate in relative silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Mira found herself relaxing despite everything, drawn into conversation about things that had nothing to do with his mysterious business or her psychology classes. They talked about Chicago winters and terrible coffee and the books they'd read too many times. You like poetry, Dante said, something surprised in his voice when she mentioned her favorite collection. Why is that surprising? It's not. It fits. He poured more wine. You see beauty in things, even complicated, messy things. Don't you? I used to, a long time ago. What happened? Dante's expression closed off slightly. Life? Choices? Consequences? Mira wanted to push, wanted to understand this man who spoke in fragments and half-truths, but she recognized the walls going up, the way he shifted the conversation back to safer territory. By the time dessert arrived, something chocolate and decadent that probably cost more than her groceries, Mira had almost forgotten to be nervous. Almost forgotten that this whole situation was impossible and complicated and probably a terrible idea. Tell me about your family, Dante said suddenly. The question caught her off guard. Why? Because I want to know. Because you know nothing about me except that I make you nervous, and that's not fair. Mira played with her fork, chocolate melting on her tongue. There's not much to tell. My parents are teachers in Indiana. I have a younger brother who's better at everything than I am. We're fine. Normal. You say that like it's boring. Compared to this, she gestured at their surroundings. It is. Normal is underrated. Trust me. Do you have family? Dante's jaw tightened. Not anymore, not really. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's complicated. Everything with him was complicated, Mira was learning. Layers upon layers of things he wouldn't say, couldn't say,
didn't want her to know. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Always." "Are you dangerous?" Dante didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was careful, measured. "Yes. To me. Never to you." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "But yes, Mira, I'm dangerous to a lot of people, in ways you can't imagine and shouldn't have to." She should have been afraid. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was confirmation of everything Jess had warned her about. But looking at Dante across the candlelit table, seeing the honesty in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders like he expected her to run, Mira felt something else entirely. "Thank you for telling me the truth." "That's it? You're not going to ask what I do? Why I'm dangerous?" "Would you tell me if I asked?" "No, not yet." "Then why ask?" Mira set down her fork. "I know you're not going to hurt me. I don't know how I know that, but I do. The rest, we can figure out later, if there is a later." "There will be." Dante's voice was low, intense. "If you'll let there be." "I don't understand what you want from me. I want to know you. I want to see you smile without looking terrified. I want to understand how someone who studies the darkness in people can still see light." "And then what?" "Then we'll see. I don't have a plan, Mira. I just know that since you fell asleep in my car, nothing else has felt as important as making sure I get to see you again." Mira's phone buzzed in her purse, probably Jess checking in. Reality intruding on this impossible bubble they'd created. "I should probably get home soon. My roommate has the police on speed dial." Dante smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. "Can't have that. Marco will take you back." They stood, and Dante walked her to the elevator, his hand resting lightly on her lower back. The touch was innocent, protective, but it sent warmth spreading through her entire body. "Can I see you again?" he asked as the elevator doors opened. "You're the one with all the power here. You could probably make me see you whether I want to or not." "That's not how this works. Not with you." He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Say yes because you want to, or say no because you don't. But don't say yes because you think you don't have a choice." Mira looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd somehow made her feel safer than she'd felt in years. "Yes, I want to see you again." He kissed her forehead then, soft and chaste, and somehow more intimate than anything else that had happened between them. "Thank you." The ride home felt longer than the ride there, Mira's mind replaying every moment, every word, every touch. When Marco pulled up to her building, she found herself reluctant to leave the safety of the car. "Miss Elson," Marco said as she reached for the door handle, "Mr. Moretti cares about very few things in this world. Whatever he feels for you, it's real. Just remember that when things get complicated." "When, not if?" Marco's expression was sympathetic. "With Mr. Moretti, it's always when." Mira climbed the stairs to her apartment, those words echoing in her head. She found Jess waiting up, relief and concern warring on her face. "You're alive." "I told you I would be." "And? How was dinner with Mr. Mysterious?" Mira sank onto the couch, still feeling the ghost of Dante's touch on her cheek. "Complicated." "That's it? That's all I get?" "He's dangerous, Jess. He admitted it. But he's also, I don't know, there's something about him. That's what they all say right before the documentary crew shows up." I know it's stupid and reckless and probably a terrible idea. But you're going to see him again anyway." It wasn't a question. Jess knew her too well. "Yeah," Mira admitted quietly. "I am." Jess sighed, pulling her into a hug. "Just promise me you'll be careful and keep that pepper spray handy." "I promise." Later, alone in her room, Mira found a text waiting on her phone. "Thank you for tonight, for saying yes, for being brave enough to give this a chance. Sleep well, Mira." She typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on something simple. "Thank you for dinner. And for being honest with me." His reply came immediately. "Always. With you. Always." Mira fell asleep with her phone on her pillow, a smile on her face, completely unaware that honest was about to become infinitely more complicated than either of them anticipated. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and careful secrets.
Mira saw Dante 4 more times, each meeting arranged around her class schedule and work shifts, each one leaving her more confused and more certain all at once. Coffee at a quiet cafe where he knew the owner. A late-night walk along the lake where the city lights reflected off the water and Dante's hand found hers like it belonged there. Another dinner, this time at a small Italian place that cleared out the moment they arrived. Giving them privacy, Mira was starting to realize, came with territory she still didn't fully understand. She learned things about him in fragments. He hated mornings but made excellent coffee. He read more than she expected, philosophy and history books with worn spines. He had a scar on his left shoulder he wouldn't explain. He looked at her sometimes like she was something fragile he was afraid to break, and other times like she was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. But there were gaps too. Huge, glaring spaces in his life he wouldn't let her see. Phone calls he'd step away to take, his voice dropping to that cold, dangerous tone that reminded her he wasn't just the man who kissed her temple and asked about her research paper. Places he wouldn't take her, questions he deflected with practiced ease. Jess noticed the changes immediately. "You're different," she said one Thursday evening, watching Mira get ready for another mystery outing. "You smile more, but you also check your phone every 30 seconds like you're waiting for bad news." "I'm not waiting for bad news." "Then what are you waiting for?" Mira didn't have an answer, or rather, she had too many answers and none of them made sense. She was waiting for Dante to tell her the truth, waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting to wake up from whatever dream this was and return to her normal, invisible life, waiting to stop feeling like she was falling even though she hadn't technically jumped yet. "Just be careful," Jess said, softer now. "I know you think you know what you're doing, but men with secrets that big? They don't usually have happy endings." "Who says I'm looking for a happy ending?" "Everyone's looking for a happy ending, Mira, even people who pretend they're not." That conversation was still echoing in Mira's head when Marco picked her up an hour later. But instead of taking her to another restaurant or the lakefront, they drove toward a neighborhood Mira had never been to, industrial and quiet, the kind of place that looked abandoned after dark. "Where are we going?" she asked, unease creeping in for the first time in weeks. "Mr. Moretti asked me to bring you to one of his properties. He's finishing up a meeting." Something in Marco's tone made Mira's stomach clench. "What kind of meeting?" Marco's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, and for the first time she saw something like pity there. The kind you should probably turn around and not ask questions about. But they were already pulling up to a warehouse, its exterior unremarkable except for the 3 expensive cars parked outside and the man standing guard by a side door. The guard straightened when he saw Marco, then his eyes landed on Mira and confusion crossed his face. He pulled out his phone, speaking into it rapidly, too quiet for Mira to hear. "Stay in the car," Marco said, but his voice lacked conviction, like he already knew she wouldn't listen. Mira's hand found the door handle. "Is Dante in there?" "Miss Elson." "Is he?" Marco sighed. "Yes, but you shouldn't." Mira was already out of the car, her legs moving before her brain could catch up, before fear could override the need to understand what Dante had been hiding from her. The guard stepped in front of the door. "You can't go in there." "Dante's expecting me." It wasn't quite a lie. No one said anything about, "Then call him. Tell him Mira's here." The guard hesitated, clearly caught between orders and uncertainty. Finally, he spoke into his phone again. A pause. His eyebrows rose. Then he stepped aside. "He says to send you up, 3rd floor. But miss, I really think—" Mira was already through the door. The warehouse interior was dimmer than she expected, industrial lights casting harsh shadows. A metal staircase led upward, her footsteps echoing with each step. She could hear voices now, muffled but intense. Dante's voice, that cold edge she'd only heard pieces of before. And other voices, angry and defensive. The 3rd floor opened into what looked like an office, modern furniture incongruous against exposed brick and steel beams. Through a doorway, Mira could see into another room, and what she saw made her freeze. Dante stood with his back to her, his posture rigid with controlled fury. In front of him, 2 men knelt on the concrete floor, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Another man, not Marco, someone larger and more menacing, stood guard with a gun visible at his hip. The kneeling men had blood on their faces, fresh and stark against pale skin. "I'm going to ask you one more time," Dante said, his voice calm in a way that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. Where did the shipment go? We don't know, Mr. Moretti. I swear, you're lying. Still calm, still controlled. And I don't have patience for liars. He nodded at the guard, who stepped forward, and Mira's breath caught because she knew what was about to happen. Stop! The word came out of her mouth before she could stop it, small and shaking, but somehow loud enough to cut through the tension. Everyone turned. The guard froze. The kneeling men looked confused and terrified, and Dante's expression when he saw her was something Mira would remember for the rest of her life. Shock and horror and fury all tangled together. Get her out of here, he said to someone Mira couldn't see. Now! But Mira's feet had rooted to the floor, her psychology training warring with pure instinct. She knew trauma when she saw it, knew violence, knew the moment before someone crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Mira. Dante's voice was different now, strained. You need to leave. What are you doing? Something you don't need to see, Marco. I'm already here. Her voice was still shaking, but she forced herself to step into the room, even as every survival instinct screamed at her to run. So tell me, what are you doing to these people? These people stole from me. They put my operation at risk. This doesn't concern you. You're going to hurt them. Yes. The honesty of it hit like a slap. No deflection, no excuse. Just yes, flat and cold and certain. Why? Mira heard herself ask. Because this is what I do, Mira. This is who I am. Dante moved toward her, and she saw something in his eyes that looked like pain. This is what I've been protecting you from. What I knew you'd see eventually and hate me for. I don't... She couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say she didn't hate this, because she did. Hated the blood and the fear and the casual way violence hung in the air like smoke. But looking at Dante, she didn't see a monster. She saw a man who'd built walls so high and so thick that he'd forgotten what it felt like to be anything other than dangerous. Let them go, she said quietly. What? Let them go, please. Dante's jaw worked, muscles tight with anger or frustration or something Mira couldn't name. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me, right now. Tell me why you need to do this. Because if I don't, I look weak. And if I look weak, people die. People I'm responsible for. People who depend on me to keep them safe. And these men? Mira gestured to the kneeling figures. What about them? They made a choice. They knew the consequences. Everyone makes choices. That doesn't mean they deserve... She stopped, her breath coming too fast. I can't watch you do this. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Then leave. If I leave right now, I'm never coming back. You know that, right? The words hung between them, heavy and final. Mira saw Dante's hands clench at his sides, saw the war playing out behind his eyes. Power versus something else. Control versus the thing he'd admitted to feeling when he looked at her. The silence stretched so long, Mira thought she might shatter from it. Finally, Dante turned to the guard. Cut them loose. Get them out of here. Boss, we can't just... Did I stutter? The edge in his voice was sharp enough to draw blood. Cut them loose. Tell them if I see them again. If they breathe wrong. If they even think about crossing me, what almost happened tonight will look like mercy. Understand? The guard moved immediately, pulling out a knife and slicing through the zip ties. The two men scrambled to their feet, confusion and terror and desperate gratitude written across their faces. Get out, Dante said, not looking at them. Looking at Mira instead, his expression unreadable. They ran. The sound of their footsteps fading down the stairs left an echo that felt impossibly loud. The guard and the other men in the room looked at Dante like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Everyone out, Dante said. Now. They left without argument, years of following orders overriding their obvious confusion. And then it was just Mira and Dante in a room that still smelled like fear and blood, standing on opposite sides of a line neither of them had wanted to draw. You shouldn't have come here, Dante said finally, his voice rough. You shouldn't have invited me into your life if you didn't want me to see all of it. I wanted to give you the good parts, the parts that don't involve this. There are no good parts without the bad parts, Dante. That's not how people work. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm not people, Mira. I'm a criminal. I hurt people for a living. I built an empire on violence and fear and things you can't even imagine. Then tell me. Stop protecting me from the truth and just tell me. Dante moved to the window, staring out at the dark city beyond. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, like the confession was costing him something. My father ran the Moretti family, one of the oldest crime organizations in Chicago. Drugs, weapons, protection rackets, everything you've seen in movies, and worse. I grew up knowing exactly what I'd become, trained for it, prepared for it. Mira's legs felt weak, but she stayed standing, stayed listening. When I was 23, my father was killed by a rival family. They wanted to wipe us out completely. Instead, I took over, made examples of everyone involved, built something bigger, more controlled, more ruthless than what he'd had. He turned to face her, and his eyes were empty in a way that made her chest ache. I've killed people, Mira, ordered deaths, done things that keep me awake at night, even though I do them again because that's what keeps everyone under my protection alive. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked, because you deserve to know who you've been spending time with, what you almost got involved with. Almost? The word came out sharper than she intended. You're going to leave now. You're going to go back to your dorm and your classes and your normal life, and you're going to forget you ever met me. You don't get to decide that. Yes, I do. Because I'm not dragging you into this world. I won't do that to you. Mira's hands were shaking, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and fear and anger she didn't know how to process. You should have told me. Weeks ago, before I started caring about you, you should have told me the truth. Would you have listened? Would you have believed me? I don't know. Maybe. Probably not. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the stale warmth of the warehouse. But at least I would have had a choice. At least I would have known what I was getting into. And now you do know. So make the choice, Mira. Walk away while you still can. She should. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was her exit, her chance to escape before things got worse, before she became complicit in things she couldn't justify, before she fell so deep she couldn't find her way back. But looking at Dante, seeing the carefully constructed walls, the armor he wore like a second skin, the way he stood like he was bracing for her to confirm everything he believed about himself, Mira saw something else too. She saw the man who'd let her sleep in his car instead of waking her, who'd asked about her family and listened to her ramble about psychology like it mattered, who'd admitted he was dangerous and then proved it by letting those men go because she'd asked him to. I need time, she heard herself say, to think, to process this. Take all the time you need. But Mira, his voice cracked slightly, don't come back out of obligation or pity or because you think you can fix me. I'm not broken. I'm exactly what I chose to become. Everyone's broken, Mira said softly. Some people just hide it better than others. She turned and walked toward the stairs before she could change her mind, before the tears burning behind her eyes could fall, before she could see if Dante would try to stop her. He didn't. Marco drove her home in silence, his expression carefully neutral. When they pulled up to her building, he finally spoke. For what it's worth, Miss Elson, I've worked for Mr. Moretti for 8 years. Tonight's the first time I've ever seen him let someone go because another person asked him to. Does that make it better? Mira's voice was hollow. That he can choose mercy, but usually doesn't? It means you matter to him, more than the power, more than the control. That's not nothing, but it felt like nothing as Mira climbed the stairs to her apartment, as Jess took one look at her face and pulled her into a hug without asking questions, as she lay awake that night staring at the ceiling and trying to reconcile the man she'd been falling for with the reality of what he actually was. A crime boss. A killer. Someone who lived in a world where violence was currency and mercy was weakness. And yet she couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at her when she'd asked him to stop. The choice he'd made, right there in front of his men, sacrificing his authority and his reputation because she'd asked him to. Her phone buzzed at 2 a.m. A text from Dante. I'm sorry for all of it. You deserved better than this. Than me. Mira stared at the message for a long time before typing a response.
You don't get to decide what I deserve. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Appeared again. Then what do you want, Mira? Tell me and I'll give it to you. I want the truth. All of it. No more secrets, no more protection, no more half answers. You won't like what you learn. Probably not. But at least I'll know who I'm choosing. A long pause. When his response came, it was just 2 words. Tomorrow, noon. I'll send Marco. Mira set her phone aside, her heart hammering against her ribs. She just agreed to walk back into the fire, to learn things she couldn't unlearn, to make a choice that would change everything. But maybe that was the point. Maybe some things were worth the burning. The next morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Mira went through her routine like a robot, showering, dressing, pretending to eat the breakfast Jess made while her roommate watched her with worried eyes. "You're seeing him again," Jess said. Not a question. "Yeah. Are you going to tell me what happened last night?" Mira met her friend's eyes. "I saw who he really is, what he really does. And I don't know yet. I need to talk to him again, need to understand." Mira, understanding doesn't change facts. If he's dangerous, he is dangerous. He admitted it, but so is crossing the street or trusting strangers or falling in love. The word slipped out before she could stop it, hanging in the air like an accusation. Jess's expression softened. "Oh, Mira, I know. I know it's stupid and reckless and probably going to end badly. But you're going anyway." "Yeah, I am." At noon exactly, Marco arrived. The drive this time took them back to Dante's building, up the private elevator to his penthouse. The space looked different in daylight, less imposing and more lived in. There were coffee cups in the sink, a book left open on the counter, small signs of humanity that made Mira's chest tight. Dante stood by the window wearing jeans and a dark shirt, looking more exhausted than she'd ever seen him. He turned when she entered, and the relief on his face was almost painful to witness. "You came. You asked me to." Mira set her bag down, maintaining distance between them. "You said you'd tell me everything." "I did. I will." He gestured to the couch. "Sit, please. This is going to take a while." They sat, and Dante told her everything. He told her about growing up in a world where loyalty was everything and weakness got you killed. About watching his father build an empire through calculated cruelty and strategic violence. About the night his father died and how Dante had been forced to prove himself through methods that still woke him up in cold sweats. He told her about the businesses he ran, legitimate ones that laundered money from the illegal ones. About the politicians and police he had in his pocket. About the rival families he maintained uneasy truces with, and the ones he'd destroyed completely when they'd pushed too far. He told her about the drugs and weapons and human trafficking rings he'd shut down because even criminals had lines they wouldn't cross. About the protection he provided to people who couldn't protect themselves. About the orphanage he funded anonymously and the community center in the neighborhood where he'd grown up. "I'm not a good man," Dante said, his voice raw from talking. "I do terrible things for what I tell myself are good reasons. I justify violence by saying it prevents more violence. I sleep at night because I've convinced myself the people I hurt deserved it." "Do they?" Mira asked quietly. "Deserve it?" "Sometimes. Maybe. I don't know anymore." He ran a hand through his hair, the gesture almost vulnerable. "I stopped asking that question years ago because the answer didn't matter. What matters is power and control and making sure nobody ever has the leverage to destroy what I've built." "And where do I fit in this?" Dante looked at her then, really looked at her, and Mira saw everything he'd been trying to hide, the fear and the hope and the desperate want for something different than the life he'd chosen. "You don't fit, Mira. That's the point. You're everything this world isn't, gentle and hopeful and good. And I'm selfish enough to want you anyway, even knowing I'll probably ruin you. You're not going to ruin me. You don't know that." "Neither do you." Mira shifted closer, close enough to see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. "What if I'm stronger than you think? What if I can handle this? What if you can't? What if something happens to you because of me? Because you got caught in my world? Because someone uses you to get to me?" His voice broke slightly. "I couldn't live with that." "Then don't put me in danger. Teach me the rules. Help me understand how to exist in your world without becoming a target." "That's not how this works." "Then make it work." Mira reached out, her hand finding his. You're the one with all the power, right? The one who makes the rules? So make new ones. Ones where I get to decide if this is worth the risk. Dante's fingers curled around hers, holding on like she was the only thing keeping him anchored. Why? Why would you even consider this? Because when I look at you, I don't just see the crime boss or the killer or the dangerous man everyone's afraid of. I see someone who's been performing survival for so long, he's forgotten what it feels like to actually live. She squeezed his hand. And because when you look at me, I feel seen in a way I never have before. Like I matter, like I'm not invisible. You could never be invisible. To most people, I am. I've spent my whole life being quiet and careful and trying not to take up space. But with you, she trailed off, searching for the right words. With you, I feel like I can be loud, like I can ask for what I want and say what I think and not apologize for existing. What do you want, Mira? Dante's voice was barely above a whisper. Right now, in this moment, what do you want? The answer should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the most honest thing she'd ever said. I want to try. I want to see if we can make this work, whatever this is. I want to stop being afraid of everything and take a risk on something that might actually matter. Dante pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. This is insane. Probably. You could get hurt. I know. I don't know how to do this, how to be with someone without putting them at risk. Then we'll figure it out together. He kissed her then, finally, after weeks of careful distance and restrained touching. And it felt like falling and flying all at once, terrifying and perfect and completely inevitable. When they pulled apart, Dante's hands cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. If we do this, you have to promise me something. What? If it ever gets too dangerous. If you ever feel like you can't handle this life, you tell me. No hesitation, no trying to be brave. You tell me and you walk away and I let you go. Deal? Mira knew what he was asking, an exit strategy, a way out when the reality became too much. Deal, she agreed. But you have to promise me something too. Anything. No more secrets, no more protecting me from the truth. If something's happening, if I'm in danger, you tell me. I can't make informed choices if you keep information from me. Dante's jaw tightened, clearly struggling with the idea of not controlling every variable. But finally, he nodded. Deal. They sat there on his couch as afternoon light filtered through the windows, holding on to each other like they could somehow keep the rest of the world at bay. And maybe they could, for a little while, until reality came knocking and reminded them that fairy tales didn't usually feature crime bosses and psychology students who were too naive for their own good. But right now, in this moment, they had each other. And that felt like enough. It took exactly 6 days for reality to prove that their promises meant nothing against the world Dante lived in. 6 days of Mira trying to balance her normal life with this new, impossible one. Classes in the morning, where she took notes on developmental psychology, while her phone buzzed with texts from a crime boss asking if she'd eaten lunch. Afternoon shifts at the bookstore, where she restocked shelves and wondered if the customers knew she was dating someone who'd killed people. Evenings with Dante, where they talked about everything and nothing, where he taught her the rules of his world in careful increments, where she pretended the weight of what she'd learned wasn't crushing her slowly. Jess noticed but stopped asking questions after Mira snapped at her for the 3rd time. Her grades started slipping, just slightly, enough that Professor Chen pulled her aside after class. With concerned questions, Mira deflected with lies about insomnia. She was sleeping fine. Too fine, actually, curled against Dante in his bed, while he stayed awake watching her like he expected her to disappear. They were careful. No public appearances together. No social media. No trace that connected Mira Elson to Dante Moretti in any way that could be tracked or exploited. She came and went from his building through private entrances. Marco drove her everywhere, silent and watchful. Dante's men treated her with careful respect that felt more like handling explosives than actual courtesy. They don't know what to make of you, Dante had explained one night, his fingers tangled in her hair as they lay on his couch. I've never brought anyone into my home. Never let anyone get close. They think you're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Which do you think I am? Both. Definitely both. She'd hit him with a pillow, and he'd laughed, and for a moment it felt almost normal.
almost like they were just two people figuring out how to be together instead of a psychology student and a criminal navigating impossible territory. But normal was an illusion that shattered on a Wednesday night when Mira's phone rang at 11:30. She'd been studying in her dorm, Jess already asleep, drowning in research about attachment theory for a paper due Friday. The unknown number should have been her first warning. Hello? Mira Elson? The voice was male, smooth, with an accent she couldn't place. Who is this? A friend. I wanted to talk to you about Dante Moretti. Ice flooded her veins. I don't know who that is. Please don't insult my intelligence. We both know you've been spending quite a bit of time with him lately. Very cozy, from what I understand. Mira's hand tightened on the phone. What do you want? Just to give you some friendly advice. Dante is a dangerous man, the kind of man who hurts people. You seem like a nice girl, smart. You should probably stay away from him before you get hurt too. Thanks for the concern, but I can take care of myself. Can you? There was something cold in his voice now. Can you take care of yourself when his enemies decide you're a weakness they can exploit? When someone uses you to get to him? When you become collateral damage in a war you don't even understand? Is that a threat? It's a warning. Dante Moretti destroys everything he touches. Ask him about his last girlfriend if you don't believe me. The line went dead. Mira sat frozen, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She should call Dante, should tell him immediately. That was the promise they'd made. No secrets. Instead, she found herself texting him. Did you have a girlfriend before me? The response came after several long minutes. Where is this coming from? Just answer the question. Yes. A long time ago. Why? What happened to her? The three dots appeared and disappeared multiple times. Finally, his response came through. I need to see you, right now. Don't go anywhere alone. Marco's on his way. Dante, what happened to her? Please, Mira. Just wait for Marco. I'll explain everything. But Mira's hands were already shaking, her psychology training kicking in, analyzing the evasion and the urgency and what it all meant. Someone had called to warn her off. Someone who knew about them despite all their careful precautions. Someone who'd mentioned Dante's ex-girlfriend like it was supposed to mean something terrible. Marco arrived in under 10 minutes, which meant he'd already been close by. Watching. Protecting. The realization should have been comforting, but instead made Mira feel trapped. The drive to Dante's building was silent except for Marco's phone ringing twice. Conversations held in Italian too rapid for Mira to follow, even if she'd understood the language. When they reached the penthouse, Dante was waiting by the elevator, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. Who called you? He demanded before she'd fully stepped out. I don't know. Unknown number. He knew about us. Knew I'd been seeing you. Dante's jaw clenched, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. What exactly did he say? That you're dangerous. That I should stay away from you. That I'd end up as collateral damage. She met his eyes. And he told me to ask you about your last girlfriend. Something flickered across Dante's face, pain and guilt and rage all tangled together. He turned away, his hands bracing against the back of the couch like he needed the support. Her name was Isabella, he said finally, his voice rough. We were together for 2 years. I was younger, stupider. I thought I could keep her separate from my world, give her a normal life while I did what I had to do. What happened? The Rossi family happened. They were trying to move into my territory, and I pushed back hard. Too hard, maybe. So they went after the one thing they knew would hurt me. He turned to face her, and the anguish in his eyes made Mira's chest ache. They took her, held her for 3 days while they negotiated terms. I gave them everything they asked for, met every demand, and when I finally got her back, she was... He couldn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Mira understood from the way his hands shook, from the way he looked at her like he was seeing someone else. She survived, Dante continued, physically. But what they did to her, what she went through because of me, she couldn't look at me anymore without seeing it, without remembering. We tried for a few months, but every time I touched her, she flinched. Every time I walked into a room, she'd go pale. I was a reminder of the worst thing that ever happened to her. Where is she now? California, married to a teacher, has 2 kids and a normal, safe life far away from anything to do with me. His voice cracked slightly. I made sure of that. Made sure the Rossies knew she was off limits permanently. Made sure she'd never have to be afraid again.
And the Rossies?
Dante's expression went cold, deadly. Don't exist anymore, not in any meaningful way. Mira should have been horrified. Should have recognized this as confirmation of everything the caller had warned her about. Instead, she found herself understanding the terrible logic of it, the way trauma and revenge and protection all twisted together until you couldn't separate them. So when this person called me tonight, she said slowly, they were trying to scare me off by reminding you what could happen, what did happen. Yes. And they're right, Mira. They're absolutely right. Dante moved toward her, his hands hovering like he wanted to touch her, but didn't trust himself to. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Someone found out about you. Someone's already using you as leverage, and who was it? Who called me? Probably Victor Castellano. He's been pushing into my operations for months, testing boundaries. This is how he works. Psychological warfare before physical violence. He finds weaknesses and exploits them. So I'm a weakness now. It wasn't a question. You're the only thing in this world that could actually hurt me. So yes, to people like Castellano, that makes you a target. Mira sank onto the couch, her mind racing through options and outcomes and terrible possibilities. What do we do? We don't do anything. I handle Castellano. You go back to your life and stay away from me until this is resolved. No. Mira, no. She stood, anger flooding through the fear. We made a deal. No secrets. No shutting me out. You said if things got dangerous, you'd tell me. Well, you're telling me. Now we deal with it together. You don't understand what you're asking. Then explain it to me. Stop trying to protect me and just tell me the truth. Dante's control finally cracked. The truth is that if Castellano decides you're a viable target, he'll take you. And what he'll do to you will be worse than what happened to Isabella. Because he knows I care about you more than I cared about her. Because you're not just someone I'm with, you're someone who makes me want to be different, better. And he'll destroy that to prove a point. The confession hung between them, raw and desperate. Do you want me to leave? Mira asked quietly. Permanently? What I want doesn't matter. Yes, it does. Stop deciding what's best for me and tell me what you actually want. Dante closed his eyes, his entire body tense with restraint. When he opened them again, Mira saw everything he'd been trying to hide. I want you to stay. I want to wake up with you in my bed and teach you terrible things about my world and pretend we can actually make this work. I want to be selfish enough to keep you, even though it's going to get you hurt. Then keep me. Mira stepped closer, her hand finding his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her palm. And teach me how to survive in your world instead of trying to keep me out of it. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking you to trust me, to believe I'm strong enough to handle this. And if you're not, if something happens to you because I was too selfish to let you go, then that's my choice, my risk, not yours to manage. Dante pulled her against him then, his arms wrapping around her like he could physically shield her from everything coming. I can't lose you. Then don't let them take me. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and Mira saw the moment his fear transformed into something else. Something cold and calculating and absolutely ruthless. You want to stay in my world? He asked, his voice taking on that dangerous edge she recognized from the warehouse. Then you learn the rules, all of them, and you follow them exactly. Okay. I'm serious, Mira. No more wandering around alone. No more trusting strangers. Marco or one of my men is with you at all times. That's going to be hard to explain to my roommate. I don't care. Your safety matters more than explanations. He cupped her face, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones. You carry a phone I give you. It's secured, encrypted, always tracked. You don't go anywhere without telling me. You see anything suspicious? Anyone following you? You call immediately. You're going to put me in a cage. I'm going to keep you alive. His voice softened slightly. Please, Mira, I need you to take this seriously. Castellano isn't playing games. If he's already made contact, he's planning something. The fear in his eyes convinced her more than his words ever could. Okay, I'll follow your rules, but you have to do something for me. Anything. Tell me how to fight back. If something happens, If someone does come after me, I need to know what to do. Dante was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with the idea. Finally, he nodded. I'll have someone teach you. Self-defense, situational awareness, how to recognize threats. But Mira, the best defense is not being a target in the first place. Hard to do when I'm already on their radar. Then we make you less appealing as a target. We show Castellano that coming after you will cost more than it's worth. How? A dark smile crossed Dante's face, the kind that reminded Mira exactly who she was dealing with. By reminding him why people are afraid of me in the first place. Over the next 48 hours, Mira got a crash course in Dante's world that made everything before feel like gentle preparation. He introduced her to his inner circle, men who looked at her with skepticism that slowly shifted to wary respect when Dante made it clear she wasn't going anywhere. She met Anthony, his second-in-command, who'd known Dante since they were kids and treated her with careful politeness that felt like a test she wasn't sure how to pass. She met Vincent, who handled their technology and security, and set her up with the encrypted phone and taught her how to spot surveillance. Most importantly, she met Sophia. Sophia was in her 50s, small and elegant with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She'd been married to one of Dante's father's associates before he'd been killed in the same attack that took Dante's father. Instead of leaving the life, she'd stayed, becoming the person who taught new recruits how to survive. You're the girlfriend, Sophia said when Dante brought Mira to her apartment in a building Dante owned. I guess so. You guess or you know? Mira met her eyes. I know? Sophia's expression softened slightly. Good. Uncertainty gets you killed. Come on. For 3 hours, Sophia taught Mira things her psychology classes had never covered. How to read a room for exits. How to spot someone who was armed. How to break basic holds and create enough space to run. How to use keys or a pen as a weapon. How to scream properly to attract attention. You're small, Sophia said bluntly. You're not going to overpower anyone. But you're smart, and smart beats strong if you use it right. So you run first, fight second, and only when you have no other choice. Dante said the best defense is not being a target. Dante's right, but plans fail. Security has gaps, and men like Castellano don't play fair. She handed Mira a small canister, pepper spray. Learn how to use it, practice. And remember, you spray, you run, you call for help. In that order. By the time Mira left, her body ached from practicing falls and strikes, her mind overwhelmed with information about threat assessment and escape routes. Dante was waiting in the car, his expression tense. How was it? Terrifying, useful, both. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I'm sorry you have to learn this. I'm not. Better to know than be helpless. They drove back to his penthouse and Mira showered while Dante made dinner. Pasta with a sauce that smelled amazing and tasted even better. They ate mostly in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on them. When will you go after Castellano? Mira asked finally. Dante set down his fork. Soon. I'm waiting for the right opportunity. Can't just start a war without cause or everyone else in the city will see it as weakness. So we just wait? While he's out there planning whatever he's planning? While I gather information and find leverage. While I figure out how to neutralize him without starting something that gets innocent people killed. He reached across the table, his fingers finding hers. This is what my world looks like, Mira. Not the dramatic violence you saw at the warehouse, the waiting, the strategy, the constant calculation of risk versus reward. It sounds exhausting. It is, which is why having you here, being able to come home to someone who sees me as more than just a tool for violence, that matters more than you know. Mira stood, moving around the table to sit in his lap, her arms wrapping around his neck. We're going to be okay. You're going to handle Castellano, and I'm going to learn how to survive in your world, and we're going to figure this out. When did you get so optimistic? I'm not optimistic. I'm determined. There's a difference. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said, the words barely a whisper. I know I shouldn't. I know it's selfish and dangerous, and probably the worst thing I could do to you, but I love you, Mira. Her heart stuttered. You can't just say that for the first time when everything's falling apart. Would you prefer I wait for a better moment because I don't know if we're going to get one? I love you too, Mira said, the truth of it both terrifying and inevitable. Which is why we're going to get through this, because giving up isn't an option anymore. They spent the night wrapped around each other, speaking in whispers about futures that felt impossible and dreams that might never come true. And when Mira finally fell asleep in Dante's arms, she didn't know that morning would bring the call that changed everything. She woke to Dante already dressed, his phone pressed to his ear, his expression murderous. When? He demanded. A pause. How bad? Another pause, longer this time. I'm on my way. No one moves until I get there. He ended the call and found Mira watching him. What happened? Castellano made his move, hit one of my distribution centers, took out 3 of my men. His voice was cold, controlled fury. He wants a meeting, says he has a proposal. It's a trap. Obviously. But I have to go anyway. Show strength. Prove I'm not afraid. Let me come with you. Absolutely not. Dante, no, Mira. This is exactly the kind of situation I can't bring you into. You stay here with Marco. Don't leave this building. Don't answer calls from numbers you don't know. Just stay safe until I get back. He kissed her hard and fast, and then he was gone, leaving Mira alone in the penthouse with her fear and her racing thoughts. She tried to study, tried to watch TV, tried to do anything that would stop her from checking her phone every 30 seconds for updates that didn't come. 2 hours passed, then 3. Finally, her phone rang. Dante's number. Hello? But it wasn't Dante's voice that answered. Hello, Mira. Castellano. She recognized his smooth accent from the first call. I thought we should talk. You and I. About the future. Where's Dante? Right here, actually. Would you like to speak to him? There was a rustling sound and then Dante's voice, strained but furious. Mira, don't listen to him. Don't. The sound of a blow cutting him off. Mira's blood went cold. As you can hear, your boyfriend is in a difficult position, Castellano continued calmly. But I'm a reasonable man. I don't want violence if it can be avoided. So here's my proposal. You come to me, alone, no tricks, and I let Dante go. You don't come and I kill him. Very slowly, very painfully, while you listen. You're insane. I'm pragmatic. Dante Moretti's been a thorn in my side for too long, but killing him outright starts a war I don't need. Proving he's weak because he couldn't protect what matters to him, that's much more effective. If you hurt him, you're not in a position to make threats, dear. You have 1 hour. I'll text you the address. Come alone or he dies. Understand? The line went dead before Mira could respond. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. This was it. The exact scenario Dante had tried to protect her from. The moment where her presence in his life became a weapon someone could use against him. She could call Marco, alert Dante's men, follow protocol. Or she could do what Castellano demanded and try to save the man she loved. Mira looked at the encrypted phone Dante had given her, at the panic button Vincent had shown her how to use, at all the safety measures that were supposed to keep this exact thing from happening. Then she grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. She was done being protected, done being the weakness. If Castellano wanted her, he could have her. But he'd learned very quickly that the quiet psychology student had learned a few things about survival after all. Mira made it exactly 3 steps out of the penthouse before Marco materialized in front of her, his expression a mix of panic and determination. Miss Elson, you can't leave. Get out of my way, Marco. Mr. Moretti gave strict orders. Dante's been taken. Her voice cracked on his name. Castellano has him, and he wants me in exchange. Marco's face went white. Then we call Anthony. We mobilize everyone. We don't just hand you over. There's no time for that. He gave me an hour, and I've already wasted 10 minutes. She tried to push past him, but Marco was immovable. If you go to Castellano, you're both dead. You understand that, right? This isn't some negotiation. It's a trap designed to get exactly what we're trying to prevent. So what's the alternative? Let him kill Dante while I hide up here like a coward? The alternative is you trust that Mr. Moretti knows what he's doing, that he has contingencies for situations exactly like this.
Marco pulled out his phone. I'm calling Anthony right now and we're going to handle this the right way. But Mira's phone buzzed before he could dial. A text from Castellano's number with an address and a photo attached. The photo made her stomach drop. Dante, tied to a chair, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, his expression furious and afraid in equal measure. 50 minutes left. Every minute you're late, I hurt him more. Your choice, Mira. She showed Marco the screen, watching his resolve crack. He's going to kill him anyway, Mira said quietly. Whether I go or not, at least if I'm there, maybe I can buy time. Maybe you can what? You're a psychology student, not a negotiator, not a fighter. Sophia taught me things. Vincent gave me tools, and I'm smarter than Castellano thinks I am. She met Marco's eyes, seeing her own fear reflected back. Please, I can't just do nothing while the man I love dies because of me. Marco closed his eyes, his jaw working. When he opened them again, Mira saw resignation there. I'm coming with you, hidden, backup, and we're calling Anthony on the way so he can position people around the location. Castellano said come alone. He can say whatever he wants. I'm not letting you walk into that building without support. He pulled out his phone again, this time actually dialing. Anthony? We have a situation. The drive to the address Castellano had sent took 30 minutes through Chicago traffic that made Mira want to scream. Every red light felt like torture. Every slow-moving car an obstacle between her and Dante. Marco spent the entire drive on the phone, coordinating with Anthony, giving updates in clipped Italian that Mira couldn't follow, but understood the urgency of. They're setting up a perimeter, Marco explained when he finally hung up. Snipers on the surrounding buildings. Entry team ready to breach on my signal. But Miss Elson, you need to understand, this is going to get violent. Very violent. Are you prepared for that? Mira thought about the warehouse, about the blood and fear and the moment before Dante would have hurt those men. About the darkness she'd glimpsed in him and the darkness she was about to walk into. No, she admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. The address led them to an abandoned factory on the city's south side, the kind of building that screamed trap in every psychological thriller Mira had ever seen. Broken windows, rusted metal, the perfect place for terrible things to happen where no one would hear. Marco parked 2 blocks away, his eyes scanning the area with practiced efficiency. I'm going to circle around back. You wait exactly 5 minutes, then you walk in through the front entrance. Do not deviate from the path. Do not engage if you see his men. Just get to wherever they're holding Mr. Moretti and keep Castellano talking. Keep him talking about what? Anything, everything. The longer you keep him focused on you, the more time we have to get into position. He handed her a small device that looked like a button. This is a tracker and a live audio feed. Anthony and the team can hear everything. If things go bad, if you think you're about to get hurt, you press it twice fast. That's the signal to breach immediately. Mira slipped it into her pocket next to the pepper spray Sophia had given her. What if pressing it gets Dante killed? What if not pressing it gets you both killed? Marco's expression softened. You're brave, Miss Elson. Braver than anyone Mr. Moretti's ever brought into his life. But bravery without backup is just suicide. Let us do our jobs. He disappeared into the shadows before Mira could respond, moving with a silence that reminded her these weren't just bodyguards or drivers. These were soldiers in a war she'd stumbled into. 5 minutes felt like hours. Mira counted her breaths, trying to remember everything Sophia had taught her. Exits, awareness, trust your instincts, run first, fight second. When the time was up, she started walking. The factory's front entrance was partially collapsed, but a clear path had been made through the rubble. Someone wanted her to find her way in. Mira's footsteps echoed in the empty space, broken glass crunching under her shoes. The building smelled like rust and decay, and something else she couldn't identify but made her skin crawl. Hello? Her voice sounded small and scared, which wasn't entirely an act. Upstairs, Castellano's voice echoed from somewhere above. Second floor. There's a staircase on your left. Mira found the stairs metal and questionable, each step groaning under her weight. Her hand gripped the railing, and she forced herself to breathe, to think, to not let panic take over completely. The second floor opened into what must have been an old administrative area. Offices with glass walls, most of the glass now shattered on the floor.
and in the center of the largest office, Dante. He was tied to a metal chair, his face bruised and bloodied, his shirt torn, but his eyes were alert, tracking her movement with an intensity that made her chest ache. When he saw her, his expression transformed from fury to pure terror. "Mira, no," he said, his voice rough. "You shouldn't have come. You need to—" "Shut up!" Castellano stepped out from behind one of the office walls, flanked by two men with guns. He was younger than Mira had imagined, maybe 40, well-dressed and pleasant-looking in a way that made the situation even more unsettling. "The adults are talking now. Let him go." Mira tried to keep her voice steady. "That was the deal. I'm here, so let him go." Castellano smiled, and it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "See, that's the problem with deals. They only work if both parties honor them. And I'm not particularly interested in honoring mine. Then why am I here? Because I wanted to see if you'd actually come. Wanted to see if Dante Moretti had finally found something that mattered more than his empire." He walked closer to Dante, his hand landing on Dante's shoulder in a mockery of friendship. "And look at that. He has. The great Dante Moretti, brought low by a college girl with pretty eyes and a soft heart. Touch her and I'll kill you," Dante said, his voice deadly calm despite the blood on his face. "I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what it costs. I will end you." Empty threats from a man tied to a chair. Castellano squeezed Dante's shoulder hard enough to make him wince. "You know what your problem is, Moretti? You think fear equals respect. You think if people are afraid enough, they'll never challenge you. But fear only works until someone stops being afraid." "And you've stopped being afraid?" Mira asked, surprising herself with the question. Castellano turned his attention to her, his eyes assessing. "I've realized that fear is just another tool, and tools can be used against the people who wield them." He gestured to his men. "Bring her here." The men moved toward Mira, and every instinct Sophia had drilled into her screamed to run. But Dante was still tied to that chair, still bleeding, still trapped. So Mira stood her ground even as rough hands grabbed her arms, even as they dragged her across the room and forced her to her knees in front of Castellano. "Here's what's going to happen," Castellano said conversationally, pulling out a gun. "I'm going to kill you, Mira, right here, right now, while Dante watches. And then I'm going to let him live. Let him go back to his empire and his power and his control, knowing that he failed to protect the one person who actually mattered, knowing that his reputation, his strength, his ruthlessness, none of it was enough to save you." "No." Dante's voice broke on the word. "Victor, please, take me instead. Kill me. Do whatever you want to me. But let her go. She's innocent in all of this. That's exactly why she has to die. Because you care about her innocence. Because she represents everything you can't have in our world." Castellano pressed the gun against Mira's temple, and she felt the cold metal against her skin, felt her entire body start to shake. "Any last words?" Mira's hand moved to her pocket, fingers finding the panic button Marco had given her. She could press it, could signal for the team to breach. But the gun was already against her head, and any sudden movement might be the last thing she ever did. So instead, she did what she'd been trained to do. She kept him talking. "You're wrong about him," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the terror flooding her system. "You think killing me proves he's weak, but all it proves is that you're so threatened by what he's built that you have to resort to murdering unarmed students to make a point." Castellano's finger tightened on the trigger. "Careful, little girl." "I'm not being careful, I'm being honest. You're not attacking Dante's empire or his power. You're attacking his humanity, the part of him that's still capable of caring about something beyond control and fear. And if you kill me, you don't destroy that, you just prove that you never had it in the first place." "Mira, stop," Dante pleaded. "Please, just stop talking." But Mira couldn't stop, because somewhere in the building, Marco and Anthony and the others were moving into position. Because every second she kept Castellano's attention on her was another second closer to rescue. Because if she was going to die, she was going to die making this man understand exactly what he was destroying. "You know what I study?" she continued. "Psychology, human behavior, why people do what they do. And you know what I see when I look at you? Someone who's so desperate to prove he's not afraid that he's become the thing he's afraid of. You're not powerful, Victor. You're terrified of Dante, of what he represents, of the fact that even with all your planning and your schemes, you'll never have what he has. And what's that? Castellano's voice was cold now, dangerous. The ability to change, to choose something different than violence, to be more than what the world expects. She looked at Dante, seeing tears on his face, seeing love and anguish and desperate hope. He's trying to be better, for me. And that scares you because it means he's not trapped in this life the way you are. The gun moved away from her temple, and for one wild second Mira thought it had worked. Thought her psychology training and her understanding of human nature had actually saved them. Then Castellano aimed the gun at Dante instead. "You're right," he said calmly. "Killing her would make you suffer, but it wouldn't destroy you. So let's try something else. Let's see if watching you die breaks her the way watching Isabella broke you." "No." Mira lunged forward, but the men holding her yanked her back. "Please, I'll do anything. Anything you want. Just don't—" The sound of shattering glass cut her off. Then gunfire, sudden and overwhelming. The men holding Mira dropped, blood blooming on their chests. Castellano spun toward the windows, his gun swinging wildly. More gunfire, more glass breaking, shapes moving in the darkness beyond the broken office walls. "Contact left," someone shouted, Anthony's voice. "Secure the package." Everything happened too fast for Mira to process. Bodies dropping, people running, smoke grenades filling the space with thick gray clouds that made it impossible to see. Someone grabbed her, and she fought on instinct until she heard Marco's voice. "It's me, Miss Elson. We need to move. Now!" But Mira twisted in his grip, searching through the smoke for Dante. "We can't leave him. Anthony's got him. We need to get you out before—" A gunshot, closer than the others. Marco jerked, his grip on Mira loosening. She saw blood spreading across his shoulder, saw him stumble, and saw Castellano emerging from the smoke, his gun trained on her, his expression murderous. "You wanted to keep talking," he snarled. "Let's see how you talk with a bullet in your chest." Mira's hand found the pepper spray in her pocket. Sophia's voice in her head. Spray, run, call for help. She sprayed. Castellano screamed, his hands going to his eyes, the gun firing wildly. Mira ran, her feet slipping on broken glass, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might explode. She didn't know where she was running, just away, just anywhere that wasn't near that gun and that man who wanted to kill her. Arms caught her in the darkness, strong and familiar, and, "Mira!" Dante's voice, broken and relieved and terrified. "I've got you. I've got you." She collapsed against him, feeling his arms wrap around her despite the zip ties still hanging from his wrists, despite the blood and the chaos and the gunfire that was starting to fade. "You're okay. You're alive. So are you." He pressed his face into her hair, his entire body shaking. "You stupid, brave, reckless. What the hell were you thinking coming here?" "I was thinking I love you, and I wasn't going to let him kill you. And I love you, which is why you should have stayed safe in the penthouse where I knew you'd—" More gunfire cut him off. Anthony appeared out of the smoke, blood on his face, his gun drawn. "We need to move. Now. Castellano's men are regrouping." They ran together, Dante's hand locked around Mira's wrist, Anthony and Marco clearing the path ahead. Down the stairs, through the factory floor, out into the cold night air where cars were waiting and people were shouting orders and chaos reigned. Someone pushed Mira into the back of an SUV. Dante climbed in after her and the vehicle was moving before the door even closed properly. More cars followed, a convoy fleeing the scene while sirens wailed in the distance. "Did you get him?" Dante demanded, looking at Anthony in the front seat. "Did you get Castellano?" Anthony's expression was grim. "He escaped in the confusion, but we got most of his men, and we recovered his phone. Vincent's already pulling data from it, contacts, operations, everything. That's not good enough. I want him found. I want—" "Later." Mira's voice was shaking but firm. "Whatever you're planning, whatever revenge you're already plotting, it can wait until we're somewhere safe and you're not bleeding." Dante looked down at himself like he'd forgotten about the blood. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. None of this is fine." She pressed her hand against the cut above his eye, trying to stop the bleeding. "We almost died back there, multiple times. And I know you're angry and you want to hurt the person who did this, but right now I just need you to be alive and safe and with me. Can you do that?" Can you just be here with me for 5 minutes before you go back to being the crime boss who has to fix everything? The fight went out of him all at once. Dante pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like he was afraid she'd disappear. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you had to see that. Had to do that. Had to be brave when you should never have been in danger in the first place. We're both alive. That's what matters. You should have stayed safe. Should have followed the rules. Should have what? Let you die? That was never going to happen, Dante. I know you're used to being in control, used to having plans and contingencies and ways to manage every possible outcome. But sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes the only option is to be scared and do it anyway. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his thumb brushing away tears she didn't know she'd shed. When Castellano had that gun to your head, when I thought I was about to watch you die because of me, I've never been that afraid in my life. Not when my father died, not when the Rossis took Isabella, never. But I didn't die. We're both here. We survived. This time. But what about next time? What about the time after that? What about all the times I won't be able to protect you because my world is full of people like Castellano who see you as a weakness to exploit? Mira cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. Then we deal with those times when they come. Together. As a team. You protecting me protecting you. Both of us being smarter and stronger and braver than the people trying to hurt us. I can't ask you to live like this, always looking over your shoulder, always in danger. You're not asking. I'm choosing. There's a difference. The SUV pulled into an underground parking garage, and more of Dante's men appeared to escort them inside. They ended up in a building Mira didn't recognize, somewhere safe and secure where doctors were already waiting to tend to injuries. The next several hours passed in a blur of medical treatment and debriefings. Dante's cuts were cleaned and bandaged. Marco's gunshot wound was treated. The bullet had gone through his shoulder cleanly, missing anything vital. Anthony coordinated damage control and information gathering while Vincent worked his technological magic on Castellano's phone. Mira sat through it all in a daze, the adrenaline crash hitting her hard. She'd pepper-sprayed a man who was trying to kill her, had run through an active firefight, had genuinely believed she was going to die and somehow survived. When the doctors finally cleared everyone and the debriefings ended, Dante took Mira to a safe house, an apartment in a nondescript building with security that made his penthouse look casual. We'll stay here until we locate Castellano, he explained, locking the multiple deadbolts on the door. It's completely off the grid. No one knows about it except my inner circle. Mira nodded mutely, still processing. She let Dante guide her to the bathroom, let him help her out of her blood-stained clothes, let him turn on the shower and adjust the temperature. The hot water felt surreal against her skin, washing away blood that wasn't hers and the smell of smoke and fear. When she emerged wrapped in a towel, Dante had changed into clean clothes and was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He looked up when she entered, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. I almost lost you, he said quietly. I almost lost you because I was arrogant enough to think I could keep you safe while still keeping you in my life. You didn't lose me. I'm right here. But you won't be if this keeps happening. If every enemy I make decides you're fair game, if every time someone wants to hurt me, they come after you instead. He stood, moving toward her but stopping just short of touching her, like he didn't trust himself. I need to let you go, Mira. I need to end this before someone actually succeeds in killing you. No, it's not a negotiation. You're right, it's not. Because I'm not leaving you, Dante. Not because of Castellano. Not because this is dangerous. Not because you're terrified of losing me. We made a deal, remember? We promised we'd figure this out together. That was before you had a gun to your head. That changes nothing, Mira's voice rose, months of pent-up fear and frustration finally breaking free. Do you think I don't know what I'm risking? Do you think I haven't spent every single day since I met you being terrified that something like this would happen? I'm not stupid, Dante. I know exactly what your world looks like. I know the violence and the danger and the terrible things that could happen to me, and I'm choosing you anyway. Why? His voice broke on the word. Why would you choose this? Choose me? You could have a normal life, a safe life, someone who doesn't have enemies who want to hurt you to get to him. Because I don't want normal. I want you. All of you. The good parts and the dangerous parts and the broken parts you're trying so hard to fix. I want the man who let strangers go because I asked him to.
The man who reads philosophy and makes excellent coffee and looks at me like I'm the best thing that ever happened to him. That man is worth the risk. Dante closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face, his forehead resting against hers. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful and full of everything they'd almost lost. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mira saw something shift in his expression. Okay, he said quietly. Okay? Okay, we do this together, but my way, with actual security and protocols and rules you actually follow instead of running headfirst into danger. I can work with that, as long as your way includes being honest with me and not trying to make all my decisions for me. Deal. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips again. I love you, even though you're reckless and stubborn and just pepper-sprayed a crime boss. Sophia would be proud. Sophia is definitely proud. She called while you were in the shower to make sure you were okay and to tell me that if I let you get hurt again, she'd kill me herself. Despite everything, Mira laughed. I like her. She likes you too. Everyone does, actually. Marco said you're braver than half his security team. Anthony thinks I should hire you as a negotiator. Vincent wants to teach you how to hack. What do you think? Dante was quiet for a moment, his thumb brushing her cheek. I think you walked into my life by accident and became the reason I want to be better. I think you're the strongest person I've ever met, even when you're terrified. I think I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you, and probably failing. The rest of your life, huh? If you'll have me. If you can handle the reality of what that means. Mira thought about everything that had happened. The fear and the violence and the moment she genuinely thought she was going to die. Thought about the world Dante lived in and the dangers that came with loving someone like him. Then she thought about the way he looked at her, the way he'd tried to sacrifice himself to save her, the way he was trying, genuinely trying, to be someone worthy of the faith she'd placed in him. I can handle it, she said, as long as we handle it together. Together, Dante agreed. No more secrets, no more trying to protect you by keeping you in the dark. We're a team. A weird, dysfunctional, probably doomed team. The best kind. They spent the night wrapped around each other, talking through the fear and the aftermath and what came next. Dante explained that Vincent had already extracted enough information from Castellano's phone to not only locate him, but to destroy his entire operation. That by morning, every contact Castellano had, every dirty cop and politician he owned, would be exposed. It won't be clean, Dante warned. There will be fallout, investigations, possibly federal attention, but it ends him completely. Make sure he can never come after us again. Do it, Mira said without hesitation. Whatever it takes to make sure we're safe. You say that now, but when you see what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine, I already saw it in that warehouse when you let those men go because I asked. I saw you choose me over your reputation, over your control, over everything you've built. That's the man I love, Dante. Not the perfect one. Not the one who never makes mistakes or never does terrible things. The one who's trying to be better. That's enough for me. By morning, Castellano's empire had crumbled. Anonymous tips had flooded federal offices. Bank accounts had been frozen. Associates had been arrested, and Castellano himself had been found trying to flee the country, caught at a private airfield with enough evidence in his luggage to put him away for life. Dante made one phone call to confirm the details, then turned off his phone and pulled Mira back into bed. It's over? She asked. This part is. There will be other threats, other people who test boundaries. But Castellano specifically, he's done. And everyone else in the city just learned that coming after you is a death sentence for their entire operation. So I'm safe now? Safer. Safe is relative in my world. He kissed her temple. But I'm going to spend every day making sure you're as protected as I can make you, starting with actually taking you on a proper vacation somewhere far away from Chicago. A vacation sounds nice. Where? Anywhere you want. Somewhere warm. Somewhere we can pretend to be normal people for a week. We're never going to be normal people. No, but we can pretend. 3 months later, Mira stood in Dante's penthouse. Their penthouse now, since she'd officially moved in despite Jess's dire warnings, looking out at the Chicago skyline as evening settled over the city.
So much had changed. She'd finished her semester with grades that were lower than usual, but still respectable, considering she'd survived a kidnapping and helped dismantle a criminal empire. Jess had eventually accepted that Mira's relationship with Dante wasn't going away, though she still insisted on weekly check-ins to make sure Mira was actually okay, and not just saying she was. Dante had started the slow, painful process of going legitimate, shutting down illegal operations, investing in businesses that didn't require violence to maintain, meeting with lawyers and accountants, and people who specialized in helping criminals become businessmen. It was going to take years, maybe decades. But he was trying. They'd also started a foundation, anonymous, funded by money. Dante insisted came from legitimate sources, though Mira suspected otherwise. It helped victims of violence, provided counseling and support, gave people trying to escape dangerous situations the resources to start over. "Thinking about how crazy your life has gotten?" Dante asked, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Thinking about how I got into the wrong car and it turned out to be exactly the right one. Still the best mistake you ever made?" "The only mistake I ever made that I don't regret." She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd transformed her life in ways she never could have imagined. "How was the meeting with the prosecutors?" "Fine. They're satisfied with the information I provided about other operations. The immunity deal should be finalized next week." "And then?" "And then I'm officially retired from the crime business and just another boring businessman who happens to have a complicated past." "You could never be boring." "I don't know. I'm thinking of taking up golf." Mira laughed, the sound genuine and free. "I'd pay to see that." "Speaking of paying for things," Dante reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. "I have something for you." Mira's heart stuttered. "Dante, it's not what you think. Not yet, anyway. I know we need more time, but I wanted you to have this." He opened the box, revealing a delicate necklace with a small pendant, a compass. "So you always know how to find your way home, no matter where we are or what happens." Tears burned behind Mira's eyes as Dante fastened it around her neck. "It's perfect. You're perfect. And I know I've said this before, but I need you to really hear me." He cupped her face, his dark eyes serious. "Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving. Thank you for being brave enough to stay when anyone sane would have run. Thank you for making me want to be better. You don't have to thank me for loving you. That's the easy part. Nothing about us has been easy. No, but it's been worth it. Every terrifying, complicated, impossible moment has been worth it." They stood there as the sun set over Chicago, two people who'd found each other by accident and chosen each other on purpose. A crime boss learning to let go of violence. A psychology student who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was love someone despite the danger. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be more challenges, more threats, more moments when Mira questioned if this life was really what she wanted. There would be days when Dante slipped back into old patterns, when the weight of his past threatened to drag him under. Days when Mira felt overwhelmed by the complexity of loving someone with so much darkness in their history. But there would also be mornings waking up together. Quiet evenings reading side by side. Laughter over terrible coffee and inside jokes. The slow, steady work of building something real from the ashes of what they'd both been before. Mira had spent her whole life being invisible, avoiding conflict, trying not to take up space. And then she'd fallen asleep in the wrong car and woken up to find that someone finally saw her. Really saw her. And loved what he found. She'd learned that she was braver than she thought, stronger than she believed, capable of facing impossible situations and surviving them. She'd found her voice in the last place she'd expected, standing up to a man who terrified everyone else, asking him to be better, believing he could be. Dante had learned that power didn't have to mean violence, that control could be released without losing everything. That love was scarier than any enemy he'd ever faced, but also the only thing that made him feel truly alive. Together, they were learning that transformation was possible, that people could change, could grow, could choose something different than what they'd been programmed to become. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be perfect, but it would be theirs. And that was enough. Mira touched the compass around her neck, feeling its weight against her skin. A reminder that no matter how lost she got, no matter how complicated things became, she'd always be able to find her way back to this. To him. to the impossible love that had started with a mistake and become the most real thing in her life. "I love you," she said, the words as natural as breathing now. "I love you too," Dante replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for getting into the wrong car. Thank you for letting me stay." Outside, the city sparkled with lights and possibilities. Inside, two people held each other and believed that somehow, despite everything, they were going to make this work. And maybe, just maybe, they would.